Opening the flank, this gambit immediately challenges black's central aspirations and seeks to dictate early positional pressure. Developing the knight to a central outpost, this prepares to contest the d5 square and potentially challenge white's queenside pawn majority. Developing the knight reinforces central pawn presence and prepares for e4's advance, aiming for early space advantage. Opening a diagonal for the bishop and preparing to develop while avoiding early pawn clashes is a solid positional choice. Developing the knight reinforces central control and prepares for kingside castling, maintaining a flexible pawn structure. Demanding central space immediately, black challenges white's pawn structure. Solidifying the center, this central pawn thrust challenges black's pawn structure and opens avenues for piece development. Recapturing on c4 initiates a symmetrical pawn structure, inviting early queen activity and opening the d-file for potential central pressure. Unleashing a surprising check forces black's pieces into an awkward, centralized position. Protecting that advanced pawn while developing a piece smoothly prepares for castling and challenges white's queen's influence. Aggressively seizing central space, this pawn push ignites a dynamic struggle for control of key squares. Solidifying the pawn structure, black prepares to develop pieces and challenge white's central pawn thrust. Retaking the pawn immediately clears the center and contests space, but it invites black to develop pieces with tempo. Developing the bishop here, preparing for castling, gracefully avoids immediate tactical skirmishes and consolidates black's central presence. Anchoring the bishop here solidifies central control and prepares for kingside castling, a natural developmental step. Safely tucking the monarch away establishes a strong defensive posture, preparing for central maneuvering. Securing the monarch's safety now allows focus on building a central pawn phalanx and opening lines for the bishops. This knight's repositioning aims to contest the central pawn structure and prepare a queenside pawn push. Rerouting the queen aims to pressure black's queenside pawn complex, creating future queenside play. Unleashing a pawn thrust, black challenges white's central dominion, aiming to disrupt the queenside pawn structure and open lines for the bishop. Capturing the pawn opens lines, potentially creating weaknesses around black's castled king. Reclaiming the pawn opens up the bishop's diagonal and activates a key piece. Developing the bishop to a square where it eyes the black queen offers immediate tactical possibilities and bolsters central control. Challenging the bishop's excellent placement, this move creates a slight pawn weakness but aims to disrupt white's development. Redirecting the bishop creates dynamic counterplay against black's central pawn structure. Reconsolidating the bishop to safety allows for a more unified defense of the queenside pawns. Now white actively seeks to dominate the open d-file, preparing for potential pressure against black's undeveloped queenside. Black aims to free the queen, seeking active squares and possibly preparing the b7-b5 push to challenge white's queenside. Asserting control over the queenside, white's knight aims to disrupt black's pawn structure and potentially exploit weaknesses. Securing the queenside and preparing counterplay, this square invites a bishop challenge while reinforcing the pawn structure. Exploiting the cramped queen and knight, this advance aims to seize the central initiative and gain space. Initiating a pawn break, this maneuver injects dynamism, aiming to disrupt white's center and seize initiative through active piece play. Sacrificing the bishop opens up the king's diagonal, creating tactical possibilities for black. The knight repositions defensively, aiming to reinforce the center and prepare for potential pawn advances. Positioning the rook for optimal control of the central open file, ready to challenge black's queenside pressure. Unleashing a pawn's potential, this squares off against the queen and opens intriguing lines of attack. Shifting the rook to the fourth rank initiates a strategic contest for open lines and pressure on black's potentially vulnerable king. The queen's journey to g6 disrupts white's queenside pressure, aiming to regroup and find new attacking avenues. Seizing the initiative, white sacrifices material for an aggressive assault, aiming to dismantle black's queenside pawns and expose the king. Capturing the rook on a7 is an immediate tactical skirmish, momentarily disrupting white's queenside pressure. Seizing the initiative, white's queen now aggressively probes black's weakened queenside defenses. Boldly sacrificing material to disrupt the queen's influence, this counterattack gambits a piece for dynamic counterplay. Unleashing the rook along the open file creates immediate pressure on the pinned knight, forcing a difficult decision for black's pieces. Boldly challenging the open file, this pawn push ignites critical central activity and seeks to disrupt white's exposed queen. Unpinning and activating, the bishop offers crucial diagonal influence, preparing to contest the d-file and potentially harass black's king. A strategic gamble to disrupt white's pressure, this maneuver exchanges an active piece for a passive one, aiming for tactical counterplay. A daring knight sortie, aiming to exploit the exposed black queen and disrupt pawn structures for a sudden advantage. Seeking shelter from the centralized pressure, black redirects their queen, preparing for a potential regrouping amidst white's aggressive knight. Sacrificing the rook opens lines, initiating a critical chase for black's beleaguered monarch. King is exposed on the right, a strategic vulnerability that might be exploited. Securing the d-file offers decisive pressure, preparing a potential kingside breakthrough. Securing the king amid the storm, this move prepares for the coming skirmishes on the open board. Initiating a decisive king hunt by forcing a critical exchange and opening lines toward black's vulnerable monarch. Relocating the king to the 7th rank sacrifices its safety, opening a dangerous pathway for white's remaining pieces. Concentrating the attack on the vulnerable kingside, threatening to expose the black monarch further. Initiating a counterattack on the queenside, while the king remains exposed on its home rank. Regrouping the knight to a more active central square to challenge black's kingside pressure. Hoping to trap that rook, but it opens up a crucial diagonal for white's bishop. Re-establishing the queen's patrol on the queenside seems to initiate a pressure campaign against black's vulnerable kingside. Attempting to regain initiative by attacking the queen and creating potential counterplay on the queenside. Reinforcing the pawn structure while preparing for future pawn advances on the kingside. Establishing a bishop outpost on a central square, this maneuver aims to disrupt white's rook activity and potentially create counterplay on the queenside. Exchanging bishops clarifies the central control and opens lines for white's remaining rook, aiming for pressure on the queenside. Retrieving the piece immediately solidifies black's central presence and prepares for future king safety maneuvers. Capturing the pawn forces a queen trade, simplifying into an endgame where white's active pieces dictate the tempo. Initiating a desperate counterattack along the b-file, seeking to disrupt white's advantage. Securing the 7th rank offers white a significant territorial advantage, pressing against black's exposed king. Initiating a dangerous sortie, this knight now aims to disrupt white's coordination and exploit potential weaknesses around the monarch. Unlocking the d-file, this action aims to expose black's beleaguered monarch to crushing pressure. Accepting the sacrifice unlocks the d-file, but surrenders the crucial dark-squared bishop. Reclaiming the queen simplifies into a winning rook and pawn endgame for white. The queen finds a safer haven, preparing to support the pawn and potentially activate the rook on the now open, a file. Initiating a pawn storm with this queen redeployment offers potential breakthroughs down the open central files. A desperate gamble, hoping to distract from your exposed king's precarious situation, though it likely only hastens the inevitable. King's safety now takes precedence. The monarch must escape the immediate danger zone. Exploiting the open files, black ignites a desperate pawn storm towards white's exposed monarch. Confronting the enemy king directly now exploits its exposed position. Relocating the monarch to the corner offers a slight defensive respite, shielding from immediate threats along the open diagonal. The monarch's exposed position is now under intense pressure, forcing a swift decision. a desperate attempt to shield the exposed monarch, but the unleashed kingside pawns may prove a double-edged sword. The knight's redeployment to d4 is a clever maneuver, aiming to disrupt black's pawn structure and potentially create new attacking avenues. Snatching the pawn is a tempting distraction, but it overlooks the exposed king and the looming threat of discovered attacks. Unleashing a fork, the knight boldly leaps to disrupt the pawn shield and reclaim material.